So as I've explained in an earlier episode, we were looking to harvest this patch of red onion somewhere around mid-July, and we've just entered the second week of July. So a key consideration before you want to get on with harvesting onions is, if you see your onions naturally, the stem here is tilted over like that, it's a good sign that the onion's getting ready towards harvesting time. You're going to see the odd stem on onions that are sticking up like this particular spike. You can bend them over like that and come back to them, you know, in a few days time, maybe even a week's time. But we're quite satisfied that the bulk of the onions have, the stems have tipped over themselves. So we're going to be looking to harvest these, and with the weather playing havoc at the moment with downpours every so often, we don't want to risk the chance of these rotting in situ, and we want to get them out of this position and think about curing them and drying them in a greenhouse. So I'm going to get on with harvesting a few of these onions. Because this particular ground is quite well draining, quite free draining, the roots are coming out quite easily, unlike on the allotment where the soil's quite heavy clay soil. We've realised that the onions don't actually set bulb as well, so this soil is mainly compost, and it's in a low raised bed, so you can see that the onions have bulled up nicely. As I said earlier on in one of the episodes, our prime reason for growing a small patch of red onion is mainly for the colour. Red onions are quite stunning when you chop them up and add them into salads and things like that. And in the earlier phases, we use some of these leaves in stir fries and salads, and that just gives a bit of interest to what you're doing in the kitchen. So as I say, it's not a large patch, but nevertheless it's an alternative vegetable that you might want to consider growing. Now obviously I'm going to carry on with this on my own without being filmed doing so, but what I will say is, once you've got your onion, and let's take this example, don't mess about too much with this bit here. Some people do chop off a little bit of this excess root. What you mustn't do is disturb this base plate as such. And the reason for it is, if you do start messing about and chopping it up and tidying it up, and certainly don't add water to this. We've done that in the past. We've tried to clean it up and found that actually it's quite detrimental to the whole drying process. So leave the onion as it is. It doesn't hurt just to brush off some of the excess soil like this. Right, I've got quite a bit of the harvesting done. We've got a small area left to do, but I just want to show you what I said earlier about drying. So I've got this mesh, this grid type frame, and I'm going to put the onions down. Like I said, we don't bother with trimming this area, and it'll allow your onions to dry naturally. If you've got a greenhouse, put it on a bench somewhere and just leave them to cure. And with time, maybe 3-4 weeks, you'll see that this green top has dried up, and at that point you can start thinking about tidying it up a bit further and snipping the roots off. And obviously if the roots are wet like this, it's not dried. So like I said, we've been growing red onions for a few years. It's not a massive amount, but they do keep really well. We've found that these homegrown onions, if you check on them from time to time and get the ones that start to soften, but you can actually keep them for 2-3 months, sometimes even a bit longer. And as you can see, whenever you harvest an area and clear it of the remaining weeds, you need to get it ready for some sort of use in the future. Now, as we're approaching midway into July, I'm thinking of the next crop here, and it's possibly going to be something like daikon, which is a long radish that's grown in the Far East and in South Asia, in places like India and Bangladesh. So yeah, I think this might be the area for growing daikon in. Right, these two cucumbers need harvesting now. The plant's a bit wilted, but I'll give it a drink before we get going. It's a nice sized cucumber. Just get the other one. We're pleased with that. We didn't even get a cucumber harvest last year. So, as I've said before, I'm not usually too good at getting cucumbers to grow well. So, let's see if we get any more this year. Now, fellow gardeners won't be too pleased to see this, but we've deliberately let the round courgette grow to a size which is equivalent to letting a courgette become a marrow. But we've done this before. In fact, we've let it get to about twice this size, and it cooks down really well. We peel the skin off and treat it like any other marrow, and it's actually wonderful in curries. So if you do get the odd courgette that you've how can I put it, missed, then it's not all gone to waste. You can use it in cooking. I keep thinking we're going to be harvesting this, but I keep getting told by the other half, let's give it a bit longer to develop a bit more size. But there are some others that I'm concerned won't develop unless we harvest this one. So it might even be today or tomorrow. In actual fact, we've decided that this courgette really needs to be harvested today, so I'm going to just get a hold of it and see if I can twist it off. That's it, there we go. So that's not too bad at all. I mean, it's not your conventional courgette, but we treat it like we would do with the marrow, and once you peel it and chop it up, as I've said before, won't know any different. So yeah, pleased with that. First round courgette of the season. Brilliant. We're in the polytunnel now, and we're just taking a look at how the tomatoes are getting on. There's one or two that are just starting to show signs of ripening. And at this stage you want to keep an eye on the plants to make sure that you're tying any plants that are pulling away from the cordon, and picking out and pinching out any side shoots. I can just see one here that needs to be removed. So this is the main stem that's growing, and the truss is growing from the immediate stem, and this is the side shoot that I'm going to pinch out and remove. And you do this when you're growing in this cordon fashion, and when this plant's a bit taller, I'll just tie it in. If you look to this one over here, you can see that this particular plant is a little bit more established, and it's crucial that you move the string around the plant rather than trying to weave the plant around the string. Just reduces the risk of breaking. You can see that the lower parts of the plant, I've cleared away some of these leaves just to give it a bit more airflow and should improve the light levels near the plants. And we're doing well here with these particular plants. They're almost reaching the top of the roof of the polytunnel, so I'm going to need to cut them and pinch them off right at the top. And that's particularly important because we don't have the really long season. The growing season is limited here in the UK, so most tomato growers will cut the tops off once they reach about 4 or 5 trusses, and these are the trusses that I'm talking about. This particular truss has formed so close to the ground, and with it being a large bunch of tomatoes that are forming, I've had to put a small barrier at the bottom there to prevent it from touching the ground. Hopefully that'll stop it from getting damaged from water splash. But it's not something I've had to do in the past. So this particular variety is one of the ones that seems to be starting the tomato growth early on. And I think last time I incorrectly informed you that this was something else. It's actually called lemon tree. Let's have a look. Yeah, it's a salad variety called lemon tree. And this is the bunch that's a cherry type, and this is the one that's actually called Christmas grape. There you go. So it's always worthwhile to look at the labels. The beefsteak tomato that we featured a few weeks ago have started to really kick on. I think in one of the previous episodes I showed you that the flowers were just about to bloom, and now you can see around a month or so later that the tomatoes are very nicely formed, and with a bit more care and regular feeding and watering, they should develop into really nice plump beefsteaks. So beefsteaks aren't something that I grow as a regular thing, but from time to time it's worthwhile revisiting vegetables that you and fruits that you've grown and just see how they get on. Quick update on where the tomatoes are, and the Elsa Craig has remarkably started to ripen a bit further, and the main reason I wanted to do a quick update was over here. You can see some of the Gardener's Delight cherry tomatoes are actually ready for picking, and that's the advantage of growing cherry tomatoes, that you're going to be looking at getting a harvest of possibly even a month earlier than the rest of the salad crop. So I just thought I'd show you that, and hopefully by the time we do a next update we might be able to show you some harvesting of tomatoes. I've got one single Acocha plant. This plant is also called Pottle in Bengali. We grew it last year in the polytunnel, but by the time it really kicked on was late summer and early autumn, and obviously the cold set in and we didn't really get as heavy a crop as we'd like. But this year, this single plant that I've got growing in a tub that's been partially submerged into the ground has produced a number of side shoots, and as a result what looks like a number of plants is actually all stemming from one plant. Now if I zoom in a bit closer, you'll be able to see hopefully some of these tiny little flowers. Here's another example. This isn't a crop that I've grown for many years, so I'm still learning the conditions in which it grows well and which particular time of year that I need to be growing it. But life's a learning journey, and we ought to improve on things for future years. Maybe by the time we do an upload again sometime in August, there might be some potholes that are ready to pick, or certainly to have a look at and see whether or not they're moving in the right direction. Remember, I did a feature on planting okra in a raised bed in the greenhouse where we had lal hag red amaranth growing in, and as you can see it's been a bit of a disaster. Now we've had a number of downpours in the last week or so, and this particular raised bed is sitting directly onto the soil and the ground in the greenhouse, and you can see that the ground is waterlogged, and all I can think of is that the okra's just not coped with the excess rainfall that we've had, and being sat in waterlogged soil, it's just not coped with it. The small seedlings of red amaranth, on the other hand, have thrived, so we'll keep them in there. And as I mentioned before, I have rotten luck with growing okra, but we've got 2 or 3 plants in containers at home, which is something, I guess. But that's part and parcel of growing your own. You do have successes, hopefully plenty of those in a growing season, but the odd failures as well.